Okay, so what I'm going to take these next couple minutes and go over with you guys has to do with IULs. Okay, so we're going to start talking about IULs a little bit more often on here for a couple reasons. And again, keep in mind, everything is just based on whatever is best for the client. So every client we speak with, we want to make sure we're putting them in the best position. But kind of along those same lines, when we don't have the education on when an IUL may be a good fit for a client, we may be putting them in like a whole life plan or something like that when they actually may be a good candidate for an IUL when it's just simply just based on weren't aware of when to go where, right? And again, I want to keep this super duper simple, like entry level stuff. And then, as we kind of progress, we'll start talking a little bit more about, cash value IULs and stuff like that. Plus, keep in mind what is it, Thursday at 9 Pacific, 12 Eastern, there's the SRS training, which is incredible training talking about IULs and annuities. Um, but what I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about are simplified issue IULs and basically when to identify that a client, and this is still like a veteran lead, final expense lead, or maybe mortgage protection lead, when a client may be a good fit for an IUL versus basically whole life, right? And again, you know, products are typically like the number one question that new folks have, and myself as well when I started, trust me. But when you get on the phones and realize, like, oh, good to know products, but if getting people on the phones and building enough trust and credibility to get them through the call is actually the most important thing, right? So like it's not to discredit that, that's still where we need to start. But again, like when we do start to talk about products, to keep it really simple for yourself, and what I did when I first started, and I think the thing that helped me keep the product stuff simple is I just assumed most people are going to qualify, want, and need whole life and let the situation dictate otherwise. Does that make sense? Like, fair to say, like Lacey, Jason, Red, the majority of what you guys write, given that you sell final expense and veteran leads, is whole life, correct? Because they're generally older, they generally have some health stuff going on. Their primary goal and concern with setting up life insurance is to cover burial final expenses for the most part, right? So, if you're brand new and you're like, I'm concerned about products, keep it stupid simple for yourself. Assume that you're going to be looking at whole life and then let the situation dictate otherwise. Does that make sense? And then you'll kind of start to learn earlier on when to identify, maybe to look at something else. But I do just want to give you guys some things to look for why a simplified issue IUL may be a good fit, and then how to explain it to the client. So a simplified issue IUL is basically I'm talking Americo IUL and then Mutual of Omaha Index Universal Life Express. Um, they're gonna be for people that are very healthy because IUL, simplified issue IUL, when I say simplified issue IUL, I mean no week-long underwriting, like it's still instant decision, just like most of our whole life plans. They don't need to send a nurse out to do blood, urine, anything like that. And then also an IUL that's not designed for accumulating cash. It's designed for permanent life insurance, right? So the way that I keep it simple in my head is I think of that type of IUL as this plan is designed for permanent life insurance. Cash value is just kind of a byproduct of it, but it's not the point of it. Does that make sense? The point of the simplified issue IUL is death benefit focused, right? Um, so what's the situation that may be a good fit? Well, first thing is health, right? If somebody is in pretty much like close to perfect health or has very few things going on health wise, because as soon as people start getting into multiple diabetes medications and COPD and that kind of stuff, boom, whole life all day, right? But if somebody is maybe just like a blood pressure, diabetes is kind of hit and miss, but for the most part, no diabetes, maybe like an anxiety med, something like that, but very, very few health conditions, that's when we might want to go whole life. I'm sorry, IUL. And why would we want to go simplified issue IUL versus whole life? Well, A simplified issue IUL will allow them to one, get an amount of coverage at a lower cost than if we compared it to whole life, right? So if we're looking at $50,000 of whole life versus 50,000 versus an IUL, the price per coverage for the IUL will be lower. We also have the ability to get more coverage in the plan, right? The IULs go up to, depending on their age, 150, 300, 450 or so. Whole life is kind of capped at, 40, 50. Um, and then it has the option, the potential to have living benefits with it. Outside of California, that'll have the living benefits where they'll have access to the money, heart attack, stroke, cancer, something like that. So super like incredible to be able to have a plan that provides living benefits if they qualify, if they're healthy enough, right? Um, so, and the other thing is this, and the huge reason why I'm talking about this is not only is it going to be a better fit for the clients, but because an IUL, in the right situation is a better fit for a client than maybe a whole life plan. For one, it's better plan for them, but it's better for you because your chances of it getting canceled or replaced by something else are much, much lower, right? Because when you help somebody with an Americo IUL, they are not going to find anything else out there that's going to be a lower price per coverage. Like with the ability to have like the lowest price per coverage, living benefits, and then the cash value that builds up. Like it's just a everything in one plan. So your chances of those getting replaced are significantly lower. And across the board with FFL as a company, the persistency on IULs is 90%. So that means 90% of IUL business that's getting written is staying on the books. So for you, like for one, putting the client in the best possible spot, but for two, you writing the stickiest possible business and you being the most profitable. So the point is the more you get into writing IULs as much as possible, in general, the stickier your business is going to be, which means you're going to be more profitable. So if you're wondering, hey, why is it important for me to at least have an idea of when an IUL versus whole life is a good fit? Well, for you to be more profitable. That's why I'm sharing it with you guys. I want you to be as profitable as possible. And the statistics show that you're going to be more profitable when you can write as, IULs in the right situations. So I think the max age on most of them is like 75. Um, so 70 to 75 in really good health and then can afford it, right? So to be aware, like Americo's IUL starts at 50,000. So I might have a 70-year-old in perfect health, but her budget is pretty tight. And so like Mutual of Omaha's IUL starts at 25,000. Americo starts at 50,000. If I'm like pulling those up and I'm looking at them, I'm like, whatever the monthly payment is outside of what her budget's going to be. I'm not even going to look at it. Right. So all those kind of factors have to line up between affordability for the minimum in pretty much perfect health or really close to it. And then obviously young enough to be able to qualify and then has the budget for it. So in that situation, so when do I write those a lot? Like when I'm looking at final expense, if I'm, 40, 50, 60 year old, that, we're still looking at permanent insurance, like they want to be buried, they're in good health, has pretty decent income. Those are the situations that instead of me pulling up options for whole life, I'm going to start with universal life first to give them the best possible chance to get, the best price per coverage. Now, one thing that used to hold me back when I first started from doing that is I heard the term IUL and in my head I thought complicated. And I was like, I don't know how to even explain it to a client, so I'm not even going to start so I don't sound stupid. Keep it stupid simple. If worst case scenario, don't explain it any different than you would whole life. And I pretty much don't, right? So if I'm helping Lacey out with an IUL, I'm going to, all right, Lacey, here's how this plan's going to work. This coverage is going to be permanent. Your price is never going to change. Your coverage is never going to change. So those two things are fixed. It's going to pay out right away when you die. So no waiting period for the coverage. And it will build a little bit of cash value. Now, the cash value is not anything to get crazy excited about. You're not going to retire off it because, again, we're designing this plan to get the most amount of life insurance as possible for the lowest cost possible, but still have it remain permanent, right? There will be, as time goes on, there will be a little bit of savings in there that'll build up that you can access if you'd like. And then you're in Texas, it'll also have living benefits. Living benefits means that if you have a heart attack or stroke or get diagnosed with cancer, you can actually advance money from the death benefit to use for yourself. And then even some more severe stuff like get diagnosed with something that gives you, 24 or less months to live, or 12 or so months less to live, or if you need assistance with any of your daily living activities. Those are all reasons you can use money from the coverage, from the death benefit to use for yourself while you're still alive. So really, the only two differences that I just add in there on top of the like if I was selling her whole life, I'd go permanent, level, and immediate, and then that's it. That's all I say when I'm talking about whole life. IUL, I'll just add in it will build a little more cash value, and then we'll have the living benefits involved. Does that make sense? But I don't get into how interest is credited or what index funds it used. Now, I feel like if you already know that stuff and you like feel really confident explaining it, by all means. I'm not trying to hold anybody back or saying you can't. I'm just saying 95% of the time when we're selling an IU, when we're, you know, recommending an IUL, the client reached out to us just about life insurance. And so we gotta keep the main thing, right? Which is we're getting the death benefit is the most important piece here. So don't overcomplicate it for them or make it anything more than it needs to be. You just kind of want to let them know how their plan is going to work. And that's what I struggled with at first. I used to try to explain how like index crediting works and all this stuff that I didn't actually know, and I sounded dumb and I confused the client more. And they're like, "Okay, let me think about that." And I was like, "What am I doing?" And so once I just started explaining IUL, given that it is just structured for permanent life insurance, when I explained it the same way I did whole life, clients didn't know, clients didn't care. They didn't ask me all these extra questions just because it was universal life versus whole life. And that's when I started selling a ton of them. And I can attest that ever since I started adopting writing these simplified issue IULs in the right situation, my business has been much stickier and way more profitable. Again, not that it can't be with if you all write only whole life, but it's a difference between having your persistency be in that 75 to 80% mark to 90%. Like that 10-15% difference, you'll notice that, right? Like you'll take that all day. Um, so yeah, those are kind of the main things. I don't know, Jason, Red, Lacey, you guys have anything else or anything else to explain or anything I missed when it comes to talking about simplified issue universal life?
Yeah, I mean, I do the same thing you do, Bryce. I mean, I don't honestly know a ton about it, of all the details of getting into all that to be able to explain to somebody. But if somebody, like you said, if you comparing a $50,000 whole life to a $50,000 IUL is a huge difference, as long as they qualify. That's the biggest thing. I won't even bring it up because I've done that before. I made a mistake where I brought it up and they're like, "Oh yeah, that sounds good," and then they didn't qualify. So you got to dig very deep with the qualifications. Even they even check things like 10 years back of like felonies and if they
Yeah.
were incarcerated. There's all kinds of stuff they check. If they're a skydiver, all the just stuff like that. So you want to make sure that they're just like very qualified. you know,
And again, if
or I'm
yeah,
sorry, what
no,
what I
you want
also do is I'll just say let's just see what you qualify for first, and maybe not even bring it up, and then just do the whole thing, and then it's going to tell you within minutes declined because they're quick about it, and then you can say okay, well good, I got one, and then obviously switch over to the whole life because that's not going to work. That's kind of what I do.
yeah. And again, if you're super, super new on here, like Chris, the only thing I want you thinking about this is the awareness, right? So your 30 or 43-year-old client on Saturday, right, Chris? Let's just say she had nothing going on with her health or like just a high blood pressure med. All I want you doing is your brain going, all right, now instead of me pulling up Eagle Select, let me just look at Americo Universal Life. Everything else the same. Does that make sense? Like if you're talking with somebody that's, typically under 70 and the health is, they're in really good health, that's when just your mind should start kind of going towards the, all right, I think this might be a good candidate to start with the universal life. and then I'll pivot back over to whole life if for some reason they get declined.
I
That
say
makes
all the
sense.
same things y'all say. I just kind of I've had people that say they're perfectly healthy, then it comes back declined. So I kind of tell them so I don't lose them because in the beginning I would lose them. I just tell them, hey, look, I want to look at this product because my job is to make sure that I put you in the absolute best product or the best policy that's going to give you the most amount of coverage at the best rate. So they're really particular. They want you to be as perfectly healthy as it comes. So if it kicks back, no worries. We're going to go to the next best. And that's kind of helped me to keep them along because there's been times they're telling me they're perfectly healthy and it gets declined.
I'll give you an example. So on Saturday, I wrote a Mutual of Omaha Index Universal Life, right? And here was the situation. He's 35. He had 150,000, 157,000 on his mortgage, right? And he has solid income, a little over 4,000 a month. Um, so when it got to the part where we started looking at like designing the plan to cover his mortgage, I was like, all right, Josh, so there's two things we can do here. Oh, and by the way, here's his health. He had one high blood pressure med, lisinopril. Okay. He had one ADHD med. And then he, in the past, has also been prescribed some different medications for PTSD, but he no longer takes them. So some stuff, not perfect health, some stuff, but also not enough where in my head I go, nope, we're going straight to whole life. Does that make sense? And so here's kind of how I set it up. I'm like, all right, Josh, so 157,000 left on your mortgage. There's two things we can do. And again, this is given your health, okay? So we can look at a term which will cover your mortgage for these next 30 years, but the thing is 30 years from today it'll be gone. So if you ever refinance and you add another 10, 15 years to your mortgage, like you will be in a position in your 60 plus where you could have a mortgage but not anything to protect it. So we can look at that and that will be the lowest cost per coverage way to handle this. But there's another type of coverage, it's called universal life. And the only difference is that it basically stays permanent, so it has a little bit of a higher price per coverage. And I go, what would you rather look at first? Do you want the lowest possible price per coverage and you're cool with it expiring? Or do you want to look at something that may be a little bit higher price per coverage, but it'll last your whole life? So if you ever refinance, or your mortgage is done, you at least you still have something there and your money just doesn't go out the window. And he goes, let's start with the permanent one and we can go back to the term if we need to. I go, all right, cool, good call. Now, at the same time, I didn't just start. I like anytime I have somebody where I feel there's some health stuff that was like, okay, I maybe kind of puts me on the fence. I just always set it up, right? Here's the other thing, Josh. That type of plan is also very tough to qualify for. You almost have to be in perfect health. So I'm just letting you know this is where we're going to start because it will be the plan that will give you the best price per coverage and still remain permanent. But just in case that it doesn't get approved, not a big deal. We're just going to pivot to whole life, which will look a little bit different. Um, but so I'm just kind of getting out in front of like it's possible that this gets declined, and just know that I'm here to help you, and I'm here to find something that makes sure gets taken care of for your family. But like I always set it up to like I don't want to just start looking at numbers and then there be a decline and then me going like, ah, shoot. Well, now we got to pivot. Like when you at least plant the seeds that declines are possible and pivots are possible, they make it a they're much more okay with it. Does that make sense? They expect it. It's setting expectations. So started with Americo IUL. That got declined, but again, because I told them that we're going to pivot, I just started filling out the Mutual of Omaha application and I didn't go, ah, shoot, sorry, Josh, you're declined. I just, when I got that little message back from Americo, I just went, hey, what we're going to do, I'm just going to transfer this over to a different plan here and see what they say. You just got a text with a link. Just click on that and then, you know what I mean? So that's how you pivot from one to the next. And then end up getting approved for an America or Mutual of Omaha UL after getting declined America. So again, I just like he's in Ohio, so they have a pretty compared to California low mortgage balances out there, so it's easy to cover an entire mortgage with an IUL for a 35-year-old. But in a lot of situations, you might just cover still. It's still I use a lot of IULs as like the payment protector plans. We're just covering a chunk of the mortgage. But again, I just explained it to him like this is permanent, price isn't going to change, coverage isn't going to change, pays out right away when you die, have some access to some money if you have like a heart attack, stroke, cancer, something like that. And then it'll build a little bit of cash value, not anything to get too excited about, but just know there's essentially a savings account in your policy that's going to build up over time. He was like, cool. Then we just found the number that made sense. Um, any questions about any of that?
Yeah. So Bryce, with your experience, have you noticed that if, like you already said, that they got declined through Americo but got approved through Mutual of Omaha, is that kind of just a one-off, or is that kind of almost every time for you?
No, it was I don't it's just trying something different because I knew that he like it's just kind of a gray area because like when I put into toolkits or whatever like it said Americo should be good. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So because it still said Americo should be good, I knew that it's worth still a try to just try with a different carrier because all these different carriers they just have different things they do and don't accept and it's hard to say when he just had a situation where it wasn't a very clear like gonna be good with these guys, not gonna be good with these guys. It's worth a try. Now, I will say that Mutual of Omaha, and again, I tread lightly saying this, but they sometimes in certain situations, in my experience, can be a little bit more lenient with some of the anxiety, depression, PTSD stuff than Americo. So I think that's what it was. They just happened, they're just whatever his med list was, Mutual of Omaha, cool with it, Americo, not. So that's that. But then there's been plenty of times where it's been the other way around. You know what I mean? Even though I always try with Americo first, so I'm not always aware of what the other way around looks like. But um, typically, like majority of the time, when somebody gets declined in IUL somewhere, they're probably going to get declined in IUL in other places. You know what I mean? So that was just a situation where, again, if there's just a couple meds, always worth trying a couple different. But I don't know. I see a lot of like, again, we don't know but when you're first getting started out and you're just trying to see what sticks sometimes we're trying to squeeze stuff into IULs that just needs to be whole life, you know? And
Yeah.
again, don't overthink that too much right now. But just more so just have IULs just kind of in your awareness of like, hey, if somebody's in really good health, like this is where I want to default to as opposed to just always defaulting to whole life.
I'd say
Yeah,
if you're
I,
unsure at first too, ask somebody for help.
Yep.
Ask Bryce, Jason, anybody that's your upline or above that can help you with what way to go.
I would say one thing to keep in mind with that with the IUL is with Americo, they're more strict on the PTSD like you said, but one thing I learned the hard way is with Mutual of Omaha, any type of cancers are automatically kicked. Where Americo, they're still okay with cancer as long as it's gone, but Mutual of Omaha, any type of cancer, they don't care if it was 30 years ago, it's an like an auto withdrawal for them.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, like term and universal life, if somebody's ever had cancer in the past, it's going to be a no-go for term and universal life. Generally speaking, there may be some very specifics like type of cancer, how many years ago, or what stage it was, stuff like that. But for the most part, if somebody says they've ever had cancer, yeah, that's a
Americo's taken it a handful of times though.
so they don't have a if you've ever question on the application.
Yeah, like if you've ever had any type of cancer, like with America, if they had cancer at like 20 years ago or whatever the case may be, but they don't have it anymore, they can still get approved for the IUL.
So you're saying
But
Americo doesn't have a if you've ever had any type of cancer question.
no, I'm saying they do. I'm saying that if you had cancer in the past and you don't have it anymore, they'll still approve you. But Mutual of Omaha, if you've ever had cancer at any point in time, they won't approve you at all.
Hmm. You gotta, we just, okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, you just said that they do have a if you've ever question. So that means,
I believe they have a question where they ask you about cancer on America.
right. And does it say if you've ever had?
I'm not
It
sure
is if it's
exactly what it says,
mandatory,
but they
but
do ask you about cancer though.
If I'm
so
not mistaken, I think
if
it
they
goes back
say if
10
you've ever
years.
had and you hit yes to that, then it will decline you.
In America?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking you.
Oh, yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. If you say that they have had cancer at any point in time, they could still get approved through America.
Even though you hit yes to that question.
Yes,
Okay.
but with Mutual of Omaha with an IUL auto decline. They don't any type of cancer anytime because there's been a
I got
many
you.
times, yeah, where I've had
I
to
got
go to
you.
America because of Mutual of Omaha.
Interesting. Okay. Cool. Any other questions about any of that?